So the thing that really made Ronald Reagan so popular was what I referred to as the let it rip economy. Now, when I was a little kid, even though the Gestapo controlled all local government and most of the state, um, we had a park. They actually allowed the people to have a park. They had a swimming pool, swing sets, a carousel. Now, admittedly, this was something that the government did not do. The Endicott Johnson Shoe Factory, um, the Johnson family provided a lot of the things that government ordinarily provides. They provided a medical for the Endicott Johnson employees, a recreation center, yeah, a park, and other things. They built a church. When I was a little kid, my mother used to take me to the swimming pool. I was, pretty small, 4 or 5 years old. And Endicott Johnson had these huge smokestacks. Now, since that time, there were height regulations on smokestacks, but these things were uh, really just immense in size. And they used to have a certain time during the day where they used to blow the stacks, I guess to clean them out or something. And if you were in the park at that time, there was this siren that went off, and you had to get under the gazebos or get in the carousel or something, so that you wouldn't get this soot on you. I could remember my mother telling me, "Oh, don't touch that. Don't come hurry up, get under here." They'd blow it off, and you'd see all of this black shit coming down through the air and settling on the grass, and eventually it would disintegrate and all that, and then they'd blow the siren and you could go out and play again. Well, then of course pollution got so bad. Well, let me add a few other things here. I live on a hill, and at the bottom of the hill there's an apartment building there now. There used to be a dump. My mother said that when she was a little girl, it used to be a pond. They used to go ice skating down there. But during the fabulous boom years of Eisenhower, they filled the pond in with a dump. Consumer products. You buy whatever it is and you just throw it in the dump. This place down the road here, Wegmans, where we buy groceries, it was a dump. It was a huge dump. And there was a little stream that went through it that actually had, if you go upstream, actually had this sign. All the paint was gone from it and everything that said Trout Stream. And then just below that, you had Harriel Drive, and then you had this huge dump, and that's where everybody put their garbage. And now it's a grocery store. So what happened was all of this pollution from the boom boom years got so completely out of hand that even Richard M. Nixon, who was vice president at this time, passed the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts. Of course, he didn't have much choice. It was something that Congress demanded that he do. But I mean, you could debate about that. Maybe some members in Congress still like the garbage dump. We'll put a garbage dump on every block. Well, the thing, like I said, the thing that made Reagan so popular was that during this time of regulations, people didn't like the idea of it. People liked the idea that, the old 1957 Chevys and Plymouths and Cadillacs, and all of the cars had these big, huge fins on them. There were these big, bulbous boats. You cruise on the highway at 110, and it's like, whoa, boy, it feels just like you're floating. And they got like, 5, 6, 7, 8 miles per gallon. Gas hogs, big, heavy metal gas hogs. And people would have them for a couple of years and then put them in a junkyard. So aside from the dumps in the valleys, you had junkyards on the sides of the hill. Out to the west part of the village here, there was a junkyard, and in the fall, you looked on the hillside that's now trees. It was all junk cars. So things got bad, and all of this stuff got regulated, but people got tired of the regulation. So when Reagan came along, it was like, let it rip. We don't need any of this green stuff, this hippie stuff. We need oil. You know, get all of them afterburners off the smokestacks. Bring back the smokestack industries. Let's get this economy going. The New York Times had Reagan with his shirt sleeves rolled up, with holding two lightning bolts together. So people loved this kind of thing. It was like, oh, thank God, oil, oil, oil. And then, of course, we got into all of this Mid-Eastern business, the Eisenhower Doctrine. 1957. The Eisenhower Doctrine essentially said that the Middle East was the same as Mexico. We had this thing where governments, before they got so powerful that they had these big armies and navies and rockets that could reach across the world and planes that could fly around the world and things, they had these policies where we have spheres of influence. These are our spheres of influence. So the Soviet Union has spheres of influence, and the United States didn't like that because the United States, we're the good guys. We do oil. We want to take over the world, you know, and spread democracy. So nobody could have any spheres of influence anymore. The United States rules. So Reagan was behind this, too. We need more nuclear weapons. You know, don't worry about nuclear waste. Don't worry about nuclear power plants. Nuclear energy is the way to go. Nuclear energy, oil, pollution. The local Republicans here wanted to build an incinerator, you know, to bring back the idea of the garbage dump. Instead of just throwing the garbage away, you burn it. And one of the controversies was, well, where's the smoke going to go? And people pointed out, well, it's going to wind up in the public space, the forever wild regions of the Catskill Mountains that were already being decimated during the Reagan years, you know, and people said, well, not that many people are up there, so what difference does it make? This was what the attitude was at the time. And people loved it. People worshipped and adored Ronald Reagan for having this let it rip attitude. But here's the thing. This is what Jag and Johnny Boner and all of these other Gestapo guys, this is what they want to reignite. This is what they're trying to necromancize, to draw out, to evoke from your soul. They want this Reagan energy back. They want to, you know, take the economy back to the 1950s before JFK or any of that stuff ever existed. This is what they want to do. The problem that they have is that there is nobody that's embedded into the American psyche like Ronald Reagan was, because the Democratic Republican single party monolith always had these various spokespersons and agents that were embedded through different parts of Americana. Like with Reagan, it was 20 Mule Team Baraxo. The Baraxo Soap Company used to have this program on with Tales of the West and everything, and Reagan was the commentator. He came out in his business suit, you know, and introduced the show, and everybody loved him. So yeah, he's going to be president of the United States and all of this business, and he was. It worked, but they don't have that now. They don't have anybody like that. Like Richard Nixon for instance, he was the crossover, generation to generation crossover as Eisenhower's vice president. But they don't have that now. They're lacking that now. So that is one of the weaknesses that they have. But, you know, getting back to this idea with politics and how there's really no hope, because of the Gestapo and the slave mongers controlling the redistricting for the next 10 years. These guys, Bernie Sanders and Thom Hartmann, I like the Thom Hartmann show on RT, but they really pissed me off with this corporate personhood bullshit, because it is bullshit. It doesn't do anything. It's just a big fucking waste of time. Like if you want to fuck around with the Constitution and change things, you got to look at the second section of the 14th Amendment, and that says, this is really hard to read because the print's so small. Representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of persons in each state. Well, anyway, it goes on, and it has this thing where the last part of it, which the number of such male citizens shall bear to the whole number of male citizens 21 years of age in each state. So this part of the amendment is outdated. It only applies to white males. I think it said white males. Yeah. Or no, the whole number of male citizens. The old laws used to say white males, but this is now male citizens. It doesn't say anything about women, and it says 21 years of age or older. Now, so this is clearly obsolete. You want to fuck around with the Constitution? Fix this, because what it says essentially is, because one of my things is I want the 11th Amendment abolished, so that if the state starts doing shit that's it's against the Constitution, the state could be sued. You know, if they want to start doing stuff like women's rights, we don't recognize women's rights. It's not a traditional Democratic Party value. You know, you could sue the state. A woman that's injured by that policy could sue the state. Right now you can't, because the states are absolutely immune from suit under the 11th Amendment. You want, like I said, if you want to fuck around with the Constitution, get rid of the 11th Amendment, fix the second section in the 14th. Okay? Now this other part that I was going to read from this book, this is a book by Stephen Yagman. It's a law book. Your Honor, this is greatly prejudicial. Mr. Blazing Tommy D has law books. Okay, this is what this author said. In December 1952, I saw a front page photograph in the New York Daily News of a man which I got a bad feeling from. So I asked my mother who the man was and why this photo was there. She explained to me that the man had just been elected to his new job as Vice President of the United States. What a Vice President was, that the man lived far away from Brooklyn, where we then lived, and he lived in California, and that he was selling his house so that he could move closer to his new job in Washington, D.C. She also explained that the man refused to sell his home to Jews or Negroes, and that was the reason his photo was on the front page of the newspaper. When I asked my mother if that meant my parents, who were Jewish, could not buy the man's home, her first response was that we were very poor and we could not afford to buy his home. Even victims of bigotry avoid acknowledging it, and yet others develop the Stockholm Syndrome. When I asked her if we were rich, would we be stopped from buying his home because we were Jews, she said yes. I asked my mother if anyone could do anything about that, and she replied, yes, I think a lawyer could do something about that. I'm going to be a lawyer, I told her. From that day at age 8, I never considered any other job. Just to give you a brief insight into Richard M. Nixon, because there's this movement. Well, it was more or less like 5 years ago or something. No, Nixon was a great man. He was a decent man. He was a fucking bigot. He always hated Jews. He didn't like black people. He was the guy that appointed all of these radical white supremacist people to the court. With all of this civil war bosh and all of this stuff. And if you look back into history, you'll see that there was always those elements there. There was always, ever since The Birth of a Nation, the D.W. Griffith film, which Woodrow Wilson adored, there was always this competition between the two factions of the party. Who is the true white supremacists? And generally, the Democrats always won out in that regard. But nowadays, I think it's fair to say that these Southern Democrats are firmly entrenched into the Gestapo movement.